name is on the list. The list has both in favor of and opposed to. I think that's self-explanatory. Please print your name legibly so that when we announce your name, it can be read by the presiding officer. Good morning. We're going to start and call to order this public hearing regarding House Bill 2114. This hearing is being conducted to provide input to members of our committee regarding the possibility of the consideration of House Bill 2114, which is on our afternoon agenda today. We have a limited, because this is the last day for us to get bills out of our committee, we have a limited amount of time to take input. However, fortunately, we have a limited number of people, so we should be able to give you about 3.5 minutes for your comments. The way we'll proceed is we'll call two names out. The first name will be the presenter. The second name will be the person that's on deck, so to speak, and we'd ask, in order for the flow of this hearing to go as quickly as possible, if your name is the second name called, please move closer to the podium. You can take one of these folding chairs, seat in one of these, so you'll be close by. Just by way of background, this bill is basically a follow-up to a House resolution that passed in 2016, which was a balanced budget amendment resolution. The resolution did not contain any procedure for electing delegates if and when there were a balanced budget convention, and this bill is simply addressed to how the procedure for providing delegates and what parameters they are governed by. So I would ask that you limit your comments to the bill rather than to the resolution that's already passed. And also I'd ask you to refrain from personal comments or displays of approval or disapproval. That's a House rule. That's not necessarily my rule, but it is a House rule, and as a presiding officer, I'm required to enforce that. The red light on the podium here will go off when you're about 15 seconds from your time limit. Please wrap up your comments, start wrapping up your comments when you see that red light come on. If you go beyond that red light, the doorkeeper will tap you on the shoulder and to remind you need to discontinue speaking. After that, the sharpshooters in the gallery will take you out. So we'll try to alternate between those of you who signed up in favor of the legislation and those of you who signed up opposed to it. And we'll begin with Ted Bettner as our first speaker, and followed by Linda Childers. Morning, Mr. Bettner. One other reminder, we are streaming this audio of this public hearing, so please keep that in mind when you're making your comments. Mr. Bettner, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to provide comment in opposition to House Bill 2114. The West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to promoting a balanced budget at the state level and tax policies that ensure all West Virginians prosper. We urge the committee to reject this proposal, along with other resolutions, 57 and Senate Resolution 9, that jeopardizes our nation's future economic health and the stability of our nation. Regarding House Bill 2114 and the procedure for West Virginia to select delegates for an Article 5 convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution, it is highly doubtful that such laws could be enforced, since Congress most likely has the power to determine the number and selection process for delegates. If you turn to the Congressional Research Service, who did a really wonderful report in 2004, here's what they said. They said, while the Constitution is silent on the mechanics of an Article 5 convention, Congress has traditionally claimed to broad responsibilities in connection with the convention, including receiving, judging, and recording state applications, establishing procedures to summon a convention, setting the amount of time allotted to its deliberations, determining the number in the selection process for its delegates, which we're doing here, setting internal convention procedures, including formula for allocation of votes among the states, and arranging the formal transmission of any proposed amendments to the states. In theory, Congress could even appoint themselves to the convention. It is also important to recognize that convention could set its own agenda and adopt a new ratification process without any body like the courts exercising clear authority over that. What you have is a huge vacuum because people don't know for sure. There's debate on both sides of what will happen, and people are filling that vacuum with whatever they would like to see happen. And I think that needs to be broadly recognized, that we do not know for sure, because Article 5 does not discuss what that procedure will be. And while some are saying this is not a constitutional convention, by all accounts it is, nothing in Article 5 prevents a new convention from writing a new constitution. If it was not a constitutional convention, there would be no need to invoke Article 5. While proponents argue that they can limit the scope of an Article 5 convention, the best legal evidence that we found said there are no established ground rules for how this would transpire, and it could open the Constitution to radical and harmful changes. And this is everybody across the political spectrum. I urge legislators to reject House Bill 2114 and House Current Resolution 57 and Senate Concurrent Resolution 9, and look at rescinding the one resolution that was made in 2016 with House Resolution 81. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bettner. Linda Childers, followed by Betty Rivard. And I failed to mention, if you have written comments you want the committee to consider, if you would file them with the clerk, who's the gentleman to my left, when you finish your presentation. Ms. Childers, the floor is yours.
My name is Linda Childers. I'm from Cabell County. I'm representing Wolfpack, West Virginia. The sole purpose of Wolfpack is to get an amendment to the Constitution for campaign finance reform. I'm here in support of this bill because it sets forth the delegate process, the selection of the delegates, and that is important legislation that West Virginia needs to enact for resolutions that come up, that have come up already and that come up in the future, like for campaign finance reform. In looking over the arguments against having a convention, these are the some of the points that were made against having an Article 5 convention, and I'd like to address them. First, as the gentleman just did, there is a comparison of the Constitutional Convention in 1787 to an Article 5 convention. They are two very different things. Opposition likes to conflate the two. Let me explain how those are different. An Article 5, the Constitutional Convention in 1787 was done under the Articles of Confederation, which was very similar to, it was like a treaty of nations. It was not a constitution. The Articles of Confederation is similar, it set up a similar situation as is in the EU, a treaty of nations. And the delegates sent to that Constitutional Convention were they were told that they needed to write a constitution, that they needed to write a form of government that would work for this country. The delegates did what they were instructed to do. They brought the Constitution back to Congress. There was a Congress, and they voted on it, and they approved the Constitution. An Article 5 convention is written in our Constitution. So to conflate those two is very different. And the Article 5 gives equal status to Congress and to the states to amend the Constitution. Another point made by the opposition is that at the convention, that a new ratification process could be enacted. That's a change to the Constitution. If that were in fact written at this convention, it would have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So that in itself is a change to the Constitution. So they can't just go, the delegates to the convention can't just go in and say, okay, so we're going to change the whole ratification process, and we're also going to do this, and we're also going to do that. In one fell swoop, it can't be done. Every change that is written, every amendment that is written has to be approved by 3/4 of the states. Another point by the opposition is that it's acting outside of the court system. Untrue. The American justice system would be completely involved in this process and could act against any behaviors that were not part of the resolutions that these states passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Childers. Betty Rivard, followed by Patricia Cantrell.
I am Betty Rivard, an independent volunteer citizen advocate from Charleston. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee, for the opportunity to speak. My questions and comments are as follows. 1, does Article 5 allow for a convention where the state legislatures set the rules? I have read legal opinions on various sides of this issue. Some lawyers are convinced that Congress would set the rules, which could make this bill premature or moot. 2, if I remember correctly, the state's resolution focused on an amendment to require a balanced budget. How does this jibe with the current administration's passage of tax reform with the $1.5 trillion deficit built in? 3, how does this bill prevent an Article 5 convention from being out of control? Can we be sure that it is not just an exercise that offers false comfort that the state can somehow control the process? 4, what are the implications of an Article 5 convention for the democratic processes of our country at every level based on our founding Constitution? Is there any valid justification for putting these democratic processes at risk? In looking at these issues, I realize that gut level, I am very conservative in my commitment to our founding Constitution. It is a basic framework for my life as a citizen. What I admire most about our legislature, and this committee in particular, is the way it demonstrates democratic processes at work. I oppose this bill as a threat to these processes. I also request that you rescind the resolution for an Article 5 convention and oppose any other measures that move us further down that road. From my point of view, this does not reflect who we are as a state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rivard. Patricia Cantrell, followed by Caitlin Cook.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Cantrell from Kanawha County, West Virginia. I'm here today to speak in favor of House Bill 2114 because it simply supports a tool already given U.S. citizens by the United States Constitution while it protects the citizens of West Virginia. House Bill 2114 prescribes penalties for delegates to an Article 5 convention who violate their oath, and it makes the expectation that they must only vote on proposals approved by this legislature perfectly clear. In other words, House Bill 2114 codifies the limits of an Article 5 convention as specified in the United States Constitution, and it adds penalties for doing otherwise. This is a bill which protects all West Virginians and should be viewed by no one as a partisan issue. I encourage each of you to give the entire House of Delegates the opportunity to vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cantrell. Caitlin Cook, followed by S. Marshall Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Caitlin Cook, and I serve as Communications Director for the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. I appreciate you guys holding this important public hearing, and I would urge you to wholeheartedly reject this dangerous bill. If passed, House Bill 2114 creates a procedure to further an Article 5 convention. At that convention, amendments could be offered to the U.S. Constitution. I would encourage you to be pragmatic and recognize that there's far more damage than good that could be done by opening this Pandora's box. Please reject House Bill 2114, House Concurrent Resolution 57, and Senate Concurrent Resolution 9. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. S. Marshall Wilson, followed by Eli Baumwell.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I'm here speaking as a private citizen. I'd like to note that the Constitution has been amended 27 times. 27 times. Each of those amendments was proposed by Congress. Under which constitutional provision did Congress propose those amendments? Article 5. It was under Article 5 that lays out two processes to propose amendments. But the process for ratification remains the same. The two processes are Congress, 2/3 of Congress proposes an amendment, which must then be ratified by 3/4 of the legislatures of the states, or, and it's one sentence in Article 5, which if I have a second, I'll read to you. One sentence which says it may be that amendments may be proposed by 2/3 of Congress or by 2/3 of the legislatures of the states. That's what an Article 5 convention is, to propose amendments. It's very clear in Article 5 under the Constitution. This is not a constitutional convention. It is a convention to amend the Constitution under a constitutional provision in Article 5. And all proposed amendments must be ratified by a 3/4 vote of the legislatures of the states. I guarantee you it's a real pain to try to get the legislature of one state to agree on anything. To get 38 of them to agree on one thing is going to be practically impossible. So I'm not too worried about a runaway convention. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Delegate Wilson. Eli Baumwell will be our last presenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Eli Baumwell, and I'm the Policy Director with the American Civil Liberties Union of West Virginia. I'm here to speak in opposition to House Bill 2114. On its face, this piece of legislation is constitutionally suspect as prior restraint on speech, as it creates criminal penalties for certain speech content, in this case voting or even consideration of an unauthorized amendment. In fact, the entire notion that a delegate or delegates to an Article 5 convention could be limited is questionable. It's generally contrary to our understanding of representative democracy that we can restrain representatives in the manner this bill attempts to do. Of course, since we don't know what rules would be imposed by the convention on the appointment or the independence of delegates, it's very easily conceivable that this law could violate the basic rules of a convention anyways. Beyond these concerns, this bill is just bad policy. Anyone who spent any time considering any piece of legislation is aware it's often necessary to address more than what's initially considered. Other provisions, related policies, downstream consequences have to be addressed. Often these come up very quickly and they come up unexpectedly. So it's entirely foreseeable that West Virginia delegates so encumbered would be barred from these debates without first seeking leave of the legislature to modify their mandate. This could leave West Virginia out of the debate. Of course, we also open the door to losing our voice if the convention has proportional representation, as this law bars West Virginia from participating in that type of convention. Now, these are the sorts of uncertainties that are inherent in calling for an Article 5 convention, and this is why the ACLU opposes such a call. So I would urge this body to reject House Bill 2114 and further to rescind their call for an Article 5 convention by following House Concurrent Resolution 81. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baumwell. That concludes our presenters' remarks. To members of the committee, we will convene our regular Judiciary Committee meeting at 9:15. Thanks to all of you who provided input. Once again, if you had written remarks or written materials you wish to file with the committee, please provide those to the clerk. Thank you again. We are adjourned.